everybody. Let's dig into part 3 of the Mission Driven Planner today. So this starts on page 5 of the packet. And now that we've talked about your big ideas and what you imagine that looking like, what it would be like to present that information to your team next year, let's pick one of those areas of focus and dig into the details. So you'll notice that the next pages of the planner, there's 3 sets of these next 2 pages that you can use for 3 different areas of focus. And of course, you can make additional copies if you'd like. So for each of your areas of focus, let's talk for a minute about how you would define success. So I think the easiest way to explain these sections of the planner would be for me to use an example. So I'm going to use the example of, let's say that when you were picturing your year in the future and the report you would be giving, that you would be looking down and you would be able to say that people were having an easier time accessing services, that more people were able to access services, they were able to access them more effectively, so maybe more quickly. The time between when someone requested services and when they started receiving services had gotten shorter, or that the number of people who were able to make it to the step of getting services from the number of people who requested services was a larger percentage. So let's talk about how you would define success in that area. So in that example, if the thing you want to work on is access, perhaps you would define success as more people will access services. That could even be a measure of access. Maybe people are able to get into services more quickly, could be a measure of access. Or people are able to make it in, more people are able to make it into services. So it could be a direct count of numbers of people getting services. It could be the proportion of people who request services, who get services. It could be what type of services they get. So are people who need particular services getting those services that they need? So perhaps like certain programs or certain types of services or certain providers, were you able to make more of their time available and were more people able to access those providers/services? So first of all, think about how you would define success in that area. What would you notice if things were going well? And then spend some time with your team, or, if you know most of this yourself, that's okay too. But if you have a team, think about what information are you currently gathering or getting that relates to that area. So what are some potential sources of more information that you could glean more information about the area you'd like to focus on? So for access, a lot of people are looking at how many phone calls they get in a day, right? Maybe there's some data or some information in your actual phone records about that. How long people are sitting on hold, how many people's calls are being dropped, things like that is a measure of access people aren't always thinking about. Maybe there's more information in any community partners might have surveys they've done, or you might be able to ask community partners if they track any data about the success of their referrals. You might be able to ask people in the community if they have had positive experiences getting access to services. So just think about all the different places where you already get information, or there's already information being gathered or collected, and just jot that down. And then how could you make that, then think about how could you make that information more timely or more helpful or more meaningful? So is there anything and there's a reason I'm doing it this way. So often when we decide we want to start measuring something, the first thing we jump to is to add another question to our electronic health records, or add a new form, or start tracking something new. And my preference is to think about what you're already tracking or gathering and either take advantage of it in a way that you haven't before or try to make it more meaningful. And I think that is so important because clinicians have a lot of things to do, and so do all the rest of your staff. And adding more things is just, it grows exponentially. So every click that a clinician has to do, if you multiply that out by the number of clients they see and the number of services they provide, it grows so much. It's a huge use of resources. So finding ways to minimize the need for additional things to collect is really valuable and important. So think about if there's some untapped potential in there. So for example, with access, are you already collecting information somewhere when people call? Do you create a record in your electronic health record? Do you add a person's phone number? Do you jot it? Do you have somewhere else that people are tracking that? So maybe you're already capturing some of that information. Even if it's not perfect, maybe there's a way to get some meaning out of it. And if you're going to start collecting more information, think about how to connect that in and tie it in with your existing workflows. So where in your workflow is it naturally happening already that people are asking certain questions or recording certain information? And could you tap into that and just make it more meaningful? So it's always my preference. First of all, try to use something you're already collecting. Second of all, try to build things into existing work so it's not adding so many extra steps. Okay. And then in the second page related to your area of focus, let's think about your plan, right? So you've reviewed all this information that you're collecting. Where do you want to see improvement in that data? What's your target and what would you like to measure? So we often think about this when we're writing treatment plans as part of our clinical work. We think about, what would it look like for things to improve and how could we measure that and what is our goal, right? What's a measurable objective? That's pretty common in treatment planning. But if you think about that in terms of your agency, sometimes people still forget to set a target or they don't set a deadline for that target. So measurable goals have a time limit associated with them, right? Like we would like to, let's say for access, we would like people who are requesting services to not have to wait longer than 7 days in order to get services. And we want that to be happening 90% of the time. And we want that to be happening by July 2020. 2020. Wow, can you believe that? I can't believe it's going to be 2020. But that would be an example of how to make that goal more measurable, right? And then, of course, the next step is to think about how you're going to improve that area. So it's great to pull some baseline data and then think about what changes you want to make. Think of who you can ask for more ideas. How can you get input on how to make improvements? And then over time, you make those changes. And then what I really encourage you to do is have a plan for how you're going to monitor those changes as you go. And another thing that I think helps is to think about what are some of the possible unintended consequences of those changes and how can you monitor that? Because a lot of times people have a little bit of hesitation around making big changes because they have valid things they are worried could happen. So an example is same-day access, right? So a lot of agencies implement something what we often call same-day access, which sounds good. I mean, it seems like, okay, I can get access the same day that I call in, but an unintended consequence of that is for some people, having a scheduled appointment is actually better. For some people, or for some situations, like if you need to get an excuse or have an excused absence from school or work, or you really like to have a plan, or sometimes same-day access means you show up, but you end up waiting, but you are on kind of a schedule and you need to be able to get in and get services and be done. It can have some unintended consequences. So you could measure some of those things, right? You could measure wait times. You could have there be a way that you track if someone requested an appointment and we weren't able to offer it because we're doing same-day access. So those are some things to think about. And then when we get to the part about taking action, I really encourage you to think of something small that you can do right away to take action on your goal, because sometimes that just builds some momentum toward moving forward. And then also to think about what things might get in the way of working on this goal. So I think those are important things to think about when you're making a plan. Another piece that I mentioned here in the few things to keep in mind is to try to get information about the thing you're trying to improve as much as possible. Try to get that information to the people who can make a difference in that area as timely as possible. So with access, for example, it would be great if the people who are working on scheduling appointments had a list of clients who had been waiting too long to get in for services that they could reach out to and try to help impact that area of your agency in real time versus 6 months later finding out like, oh, wow, 80% of people are waiting more than 7 days. It's a little late to do much about that. And it can kind of lead to burnout if people are sort of working on a project and they can't see the results. They can't see if they're making a difference. So I really encourage you to think of ways to get that information into the hands of the people who can make a difference. And then also, I think when talking about this goal that you have, and I think this kind of gets back to our original conversation about your mission and what really speaks to your heart and drives you and you feel passionate about, is to bring that with you when you talk about this goal to the rest of your agency. So talk about how important it is and why you feel like it's meaningful and why it's something that connects with your agency's mission, because I think that everyone likes to feel like we're working toward a mission, right? We're working toward this thing that is going to make a difference in people's lives. That's often why people work at our agencies. So try to bring that with you. Try to carry that forward as you're talking about this, even as you get into these details, because it can get overwhelming, and it helps if everyone feels like we're in this together and we're working on it because it's important. So that's for each of your areas. Try to go through that process. Think through, what are you currently measuring? How could you enhance that? What could you add to that? What's your plan for working on it? And then what are you going to do about it? And then how to get that into the hands of the people who need that information. And then the very end of the planner, if you get to the very last page here, there's just a little section here about sort of some more internal work for you that might be helpful as you're working on these goals. So, because those goals don't exist in a vacuum, right? So you're going to work on these goals, and you're going to work on having them making progress in areas on things you really care about. But that's not your whole life, right? You have a whole big, beautiful life that you're living out there in the world. And so I think it's important to think about how these goals fit into your bigger picture, the rest of your life. And so I've added a section here about gratitude. I think a good way to start thinking about what's important to your whole life is to think about the areas of your life that you are feeling grateful for, things that are working well, or things that you care about, things that you're grateful for. Gratitude is just a nice place to start when you're thinking about your life. And then think a little bit about what your hopes and dreams are for 2020. What's going to be happening for you outside of work? What changes are happening in your life? Just kind of give room for those things, because you're a human, and that's part of what you bring to this work too. So then I just have a little question here about what are some things that you could do to help set yourself up for success? So some thinking about some self-care, social support, what are some areas of your life that you want to prop up a little bit so that you can make some progress on these goals? Because I think you're going to be thinking a lot about these things that are really closely tied to who you are, and that can be a little bit vulnerable. So thinking about how you can build in support and some good listeners around you, some peers who can help support you, and just make it so that you're not all alone in this, because otherwise it can feel kind of isolating, and it can also, when you're feeling vulnerable and isolated, it's not a great combination. So I encourage you to think about that. I also wanted to let you know that I'm offering some mission-driven planning sessions that you can sign up for on my website. Each session would be an opportunity to walk through one of your areas of focus and go through these steps with you about how you might measure that, how you might track it, what are you already measuring or tracking. So you'll bring your big ideas, and I'll bring my knowledge and skills with data and analysis and operations and all that kind of stuff, and we'll put together a plan together that'll help you work towards some progress in that area. So if you would like some support around that, you can check out that section of my website. It's I'm offering 45-minute sessions to chat with me, and like I said, it's up there on my website under the consulting section under mission-driven planning session. I'll put a link in the comments here. So anyway, it's been great talking to you all. I hope that you have an opportunity to work on some of these goals. I hope you have a chance to reconnect with your mission and your values and the things that are really important to you, because that's what we need in behavioral health. We need people who are doing that. So thanks for your work so far, and I wish you all the best as you continue on it. If you have any questions about any of this, please feel free to email me at ginger@missiondrivendata.com. And if you'd like to know more about some of the things that I do, you can always check me out on my website or any of my social media channels. But my website is missiondrivendata.com. All right, you guys, take care, and we'll talk again soon. Bye.